Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, anyone watching now or listening later. It is my absolute pleasure to be joined this evening slash afternoon by Thomas J. Devens. Thomas, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
No. It's my absolute pleasure when I invite someone and people accept. It always surprises me. So thank you. Um, Thomas, before we get like into the nitty gritty stuff, right? Can I get a little bit personal?
Yeah.
Right. So, my understanding, you used to play metal in a band in a past life. Is that right?
Punk metal, kind of like a cross between the two. Yeah.
Well, so what did you play? Like drums, bass? What was the thing?
Nope. I was the guy that yelled into a microphone.
Fantastic. So you used to yell into a microphone, right? As a, for your day job, you work in a foundry,
Yep.
like heavy metal lifting, hammering stuff, sort of thing,
Yes.
right? For
Lots
any
of large things to pick up.
Right. So, and for anyone not watching and just listening, you've got a mighty Viking beard and a nose ring.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that writing romance wasn't the thing for you, was it?
I mean, it was actually hard to pull myself out of that. No. Yeah, it wasn't.
um, because you're not the first person I talked to or that I've heard about that, went from being a musician and then when that didn't work out, so sort of transitioning and started writing. Do you think for you, you've always had that kind of urge to put pen to paper and just write down your stories or your emotions through either songwriting or fiction writing?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started out with writing too, because when I was a little kid, I remember always sitting at a typewriter, just jotting out these awful stories that should never exist. But yeah, so like I was really into fantasy when I was a kid and wanted to write. And then just as I grew up, I kind of grew out of that a little bit and focused on music. And then it kind of just went full circle after a while.
Mm. And so, were you the main lyricist, songwriter in your band?
Yeah.
And so, thematically, what were you writing about back then?
A lot of it wasn't too different from some of the stuff I write in books, but also like a lot of like primarily socio-political stuff and a little bit of like mental health stuff.
Hmm. All right. And so, how far along the making it with the music business did you get to?
Not very.
Because
we
go on. Sorry.
we never recorded much more than like some poor quality demos on a 4 track in a basement, and
Mm.
there were points where I was going to release LPs, but just after saving up the money, didn't work things out with the studio time, and just organizing everyone was always difficult. So it just never really worked out.
Yeah, it's tough. I remember I had usual friends in high school, as you would call it in the US, and they had a band, and there was some talent there, but it's the whole pinning everyone down and being professional about it. And I think they managed to record a couple of demos. Like one of them was a bit like computer savvy, so he got Pro Tools, and they actually recorded like pretty decent quality, a couple of demo CDs. But then it's the whole business of selling it, moving it around, putting yourself out there. I think maybe comes a point in the life of that sort of aspiring band where you need a manager, isn't it? You need someone to take care of that kind of part of the business, isn't it?
Yeah, that, or at least for everyone to be on the same page and willing to put in the same amount of time for it.
Ain't that the story, isn't it? Um, okay, and then so when did you sort of start writing full time, so to speak?
I started actually trying to write probably about, I'd say maybe like 8 years ago now.
Right. Okay.
And that was when I sat down and started world building and gradually working on my first novel, which
Mm.
took me like 4 years to write.
Yeah, 4 years, isn't it? So Drew is here in the chat. So hi, Drew.
How's it
Um,
going?
so you're just to give a bit of more context here. So had a look around. You're writing at present. Your series is the Fall of Emros.
Yep.
So far, you've got two main books, and is it one or two novellas now?
So it's one novella's out, and then a second one is coming out. It was going to be at the end of the month. Now it's pushed to November, but that's actually a separate series.
Right, but in the same world of.
Nope,
Oh,
separate
okay.
world.
All right. Okay. Sorry. And so, in the past, I always used to ask authors, like, I think that everything has been done in the fantasy genre, except for the Dark Lord actually winning. But people always tell me I was wrong. So nothing. I'm changing my question, and I would put it to you, like, what do you think, if at all, you are doing different or bringing new to the table?
I don't know. Sorry.
No worries.
I don't really know that I wouldn't try to claim that I really am other than my own voice. Um I'm not really going out of my way to try to do something different, more so just telling the story I want to tell. So I think it's important to not try to have like everything be just completely cliche, generic stuff. But at the same time, I feel like you could really lose what you're doing if you put too much effort in originality.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
So it's good to have like some sort of a balance there. So really I'm just writing what comes to my mind and the stories I want to tell in my voice.
Okay. No, no, and I respect that. Um, so why do you choose a? So I do apologize. I haven't read your books, but how much of a sort of tropey medieval European fantasy setting is it?
I'd say for the setting, it's kind of like there's the basic groundwork of that tropey medieval European setting, but not like in the sense of like the weaponry and
Mm-hmm.
like the level of technology. But I also think I have a tendency to put like a bit of like a Western influence in it. Like there's definitely lots of wandering prairies and farmlands and that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely the medieval European vibe, but I don't try to go too heavily into that.
Because I think you define your series or your books as gritty, as opposed to maybe having said grimdark. So is that a clear distinction in your mind?
That's more so that I don't really know what grimdark is. That's always that argument that comes up that what exactly is it? So I just some like I've definitely had people review my books say that it's grimdark. So I'll like if I'm like putting my information up somewhere and that's an option for a subgenre, I'll check that box. But I try not to just say it because everyone has their own interpretation of what grimdark is. So I just stick with gritty fantasy, and I feel like that covers it.
Gritty. I like that. So we're creating a new category. I think you're right. I think once we spent 2 hours on one of the page chewing on the podcast, 2 hours trying to figure out what grimdark was, and I don't think we actually came to a
Yeah.
general consensus. So, um, so what made you choose that kind of setting to tell your stories? Why that as opposed to an urban fantasy or a western, like full on western, like you said? There are influences in your work.
That's probably just the nerdy side of me that I like swords and axes and stuff.
Because were you always reading fantasy as a child?
When I was a kid, I mostly read fantasy and sci-fi, though there's a lot of books I read that I do not remember.
Oh,
But then I kind of like by the time I got into high school, I kind of like veered away and started reading more, like George Orwell and stuff like that.
hmm.
And I kind of veered away from straight up fantasy for a while and then probably didn't get back into it until my mid 20s or so.
I think I can relate to that. Do you think that, like, us people that grew up with The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, whatever it was, you kind of sort of maybe half attempt or maybe subconsciously attempt to get out of it, to like be a bit more grown up, read all the stuff, and eventually you realize, actually, no, I did enjoy fantasy. Why would I stop reading it? Does that echo with you?
I don't like I when I wasn't reading fantasy, I was still like I still preferred fantasy themed video games, movies and stuff like that. I think for me it might have just more so been not really knowing what was out there
Hmm.
and not going to bookstores and just like grabbing random things off the shelf. Like I didn't I didn't get the internet until I was like in my mid teens probably. So there wasn't all of that information at my fingertips to find so many options until later on.
Yeah, because where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York.
So, for those ignorant Europeans like me, what's the difference between New York, where I've actually visited New York, but what's the difference between New York City and upstate New York?
A lot.
Go on.
I grew up on like a back road in the woods that I don't think was paved until like I was probably like 10 or so,
Right.
and just kind of the middle of nowhere, but also close to like a smaller city, but a very small city.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, like what was that?
No, Drew was saying that the difference between upstate New York and New York City is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
um, because yeah, like so because I grew up in the south of Spain, it was a relatively big city, but I think in the 80s there was only like one geeky bookstore in the whole town. So there was only one shop for fantasy, RPGs, that kind of thing. So whatever books they had, that's what you had access to. So it wasn't
Mhm.
exactly like the most varied selection there. Um, yeah. What what were your sort of formative books that you read as a child?
I like I said, a lot of what I read as a kid I can't remember, which is weird, but I remember I was always reading these one thing that I always found were these like Star Wars books that I don't know the names of. This is before the prequels came out or anything like that.
Might have
And
been
then
the Timothy Zahn books. I think he did like a sequel to the original trilogy, and they were quite
mhm,
big selling. The Timothy Zahn had a series. Yeah, yeah, go on.
that does ring a bell. And then when I was in the fourth grade, I think it was, I remember seeing the cover of the Sword of Shannara
Mm,
and being like, I want that. And when everyone was reading reading books for class, I just had this giant fantasy book. But I have to read that again sometime because I don't remember anything about it.
So just for my own curiosity, how far did you get into the Shannara series? Because it's bloody long.
I only read the first
Oh,
book.
already the first one. Okay.
I don't even think that the bookstore I got it at had the second book.
Right.
So I didn't even know it was a series until I was older.
Okay. Yeah. This because I hear what you're saying, and it was the same for me when I read the Icewind Dale trilogy, like the Dark Elf by Salvatore, Forgotten Realms, and then I moved to the UK where there was a much bigger sort of fantasy culture and all the stuff. It's like, wow, like there's more books. Like we'll go into a proper fantasy bookstore and see, shelves and shelves and realize how much more depth there was there. Um, so I was just thinking, so have you ever sat down to write with an idea of trying to emulate a particular author? Or like I
Not
would,
really.
okay,
Like I never thought about trying to go for a particular style, just kind of what comes out.
right. So is there anyone that you would pinpoint to say was an influence in how you approach your writing, or do you approach them off with a blank slate?
Uh, there's definitely influence. I mean, everything kind of has its way of influencing a little bit. And so I would imagine that like the series that I was reading around the time that I started probably had the most influence, which was like Malazan, the Black Company, um, First Law, like all those things I've read around the time that I was starting to write.
Right. Okay. Because I haven't read Malazan. It's one of those things that I think I keep trying to push a little bit out there. I'm hoping to let the hype die down a bit and approach it without any influence. Um. So how would you describe your setting, this world of Emros?
It is definitely a medieval influence setting that is this large empire that's existed for a long time and is at the point that it's had a rather peaceful few years and the king or the emperor dies. And so it's set at this point where that kind of shifts everything and alters the state of the entire empire. And his son takes control and isn't good at it.
Mm.
And so it's a shift from a very peaceful era into turmoil.
Okay, so it's more of a is it more of a political kind of intrigue sort of thing?
Not really. There are elements, but what I like to do is while all this that's like the background setting,
Hmm.
but I like to focus on the smaller characters.
Right.
So like the majority of it follows just a mercenary company that's trying to survive as all of these changes are taking place.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. At this point, I think I need to apologize if anyone hears any child crying in the background. I think my little one is having a meltdown. So anyway, okay. And out of curiosity, how much magic have you got in your world?
In the Fall of Emros series, there, especially in the first book, there is hardly any.
Okay.
I put elements in so that the reader knows that it does exist, but in this world, the people don't believe in magic, and it's kind of unheard of and mythological, and like people talk about it and some people think it exists but most don't believe in it, and gradually throughout the series it becomes more and more prevalent and starts to have like sort of a resurgence because it was sort of kind of like hidden away by certain people.
Oh, that's that's an interesting take. All right, so it's okay. So it's kind of like magic sort of slowly coming back to the world.
Yep.
I like that. I like that. I'm not entirely sure if I can sort of relate that to any other series I may have read, because I mean we were talking a little bit before going live, but you've talked about not being able to read so much now that you're writing all the time. Well, or as much as you would like. Um, because where do you stand on this sort of modern fantasy where actually there is very little magic?
I like the low fantasy settings. I like stuff with very little magic, but I don't necessarily have a preference.
Right, that's fair enough.
I've
And
never been too into like the very in-depth magic systems.
thank you, thank you. So, because that was going to be my so okay. So please tell me that whoever does magic in your world, they can cast fireballs and do crazy stuff, and they're not basically athletes on drugs, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't get that shift it's like we're trying to strip the fantasy away from fantasy, basically. Um, yeah, go on. Sorry.
In the Fall of Emros, that's the way it's set up with, and I definitely have rules that I follow with the magic, but they're kind of loose.
Mm-hmm.
But then with the other series, the series of novellas, Vermin of the Old Empire, I'm doing that where there is full magic in it, but that like I will regularly have characters mention like nobody knows how magic works.
Mm,
So
okay.
the rules to that are even looser.
Okay.
And yeah, there's definitely fireballs, there's necromancers, there's
Yeah.
everything.
Music to my ears. Music to my ears. Fantastic. Um, I think I may have to pick them up next year. So we've got here someone praising the covers for Stone and Shields.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So question. So obviously, writing for people that don't know seems a bit unreasonable to say that it takes years, but it does take years for the average person to write a fantasy book. Particularly, how long are your books? Are we talking like 600, 800 pages?
Um Probably they're slightly on the shorter side. For Fall of Emros, they are the first one was a little over 100,000 words, which I think translates to like higher 400, 4 to 500 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one was a little shorter, around 90,000 words.
Okay. And sorry, yes, you can shamelessly self-promote. So where are your books? Where are your books available?
Right now, they're just available on Amazon.
Okay. And so what's your process for writing? Are you I seem to ask this out of everyone. Have you got everything planned out, or do you sometimes surprise yourself and the story runs away from you and you go like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting this.
No, I'm very much a what is it a
Gar, gar,
pantser?
gardener.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just start writing. I might have a few things in my head of where I want things to end up, or I'll have like an idea pop in my head that I'll write down a note and like this, I want to have this happen. But I just write as I go. And then I'll usually, every time I finish a chapter, I'll print it out and put it in a binder.
Hmm.
And as I'm going, sometimes I'll go back, read a chapter. I might do some edits while I'm writing the other chapters, and just to make sure everything still goes together.
Hmm.
But yeah, for the most part, I just start in the beginning, work my way to the end, and generally have an idea of where it's going to end up, but no more than that.
And have you ever written yourself in a corner?
Yes.
Okay, and okay, so go on. Can you give details of that?
It would be less so writing myself into a corner and just more just kind of foiling my own plans.
Mm.
Like there were a few things, especially in Stone and Shield, I wanted to do that in a way where I wasn't being too favorable of characters, where I didn't accidentally decide that I had a favorite character and nothing bad happened to them. So to allow for some of like the chaos that would happen in a battle, one of the like a major battle in it, I made a little map and kind of marked and numbered where each of the major named characters were, and then rolled dice to see what character's POV I was going to be on, and then rolled dice to see if they were going to survive or not. And I definitely had some characters die that I had plans for in the future.
Okay, okay, so hang on. This literally happened.
Yep.
You drew a map and you rolled die, and you killed off characters you have plans for. That is
Yep.
That is bonkers. Come on. How many times did you re-roll?
I didn't, not once.
Man, that is a crazy story. And so, did you have to get that painful moment of having to get the scissors out and chop off part of what you have written?
Since I write as I go, I didn't have to worry about that because they were plans I had that I hadn't written yet. Just I knew where I wanted a certain character to end up, but then they didn't make it.
That Drew is with me here. That's wild. Like never heard of any. That's absolutely that's insane. That is crazy. So you're merciless then. Just leave it all to Lady Luck.
Yeah, gotta like I in a few of them like I would roll. I forget. I think there was like 25 characters up for which one I
For a
would be
drop.
going to. So I just rolled like um a D like the percentile dice and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
D&D. And it was like, okay, well, I'm gonna jump to this character's POV now. I started writing it, and then once whatever happens in that part of the battle with that character, I'd roll the next dice and just a simple roll a D20, 10 or higher, they're good, below 10, they're dead. And
And that's how you work your
there
way
were a few
through
dead.
your own characters.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have a suggestion here for your next story. You should poll on the forums instead of rolling dice.
I kind of did that.
Yeah. That's actually an insane story. So, but okay. So when you were doing that, which is as we just said, absolutely insane, did you at any point regret it or go? Oh, did you go like, "Fuck! I wish I hadn't
Oh,
done that."
yes.
Or, but you just went ahead.
I made the decision. I had to stick with it.
That is a
I don't know
crazy.
if I'll do it again.
So you actually built some attachments to some of your characters.
No, I'm still
Heartless.
letting everyone is at risk pretty much. But there are certain things that I want. There are a few characters I'm like, okay, this is going to be a major plot point in a little while. So I'm not going to let anything happen to them just yet.
So some of them may get some plot armor for a while, and then
temporarily.
yeah. Okay, okay, okay. I like that. I really like that. So, which kind of that sort of introduction of randomness into your storytelling. I haven't read it, but I've got the app because you wrote a story for Livia's Unearthed Stories, right?
Yeah.
One of those sort of kind of choose your, well, not choose your own adventure, but you take
Yeah.
decisions and
Interactive.
yeah. Thank you. That's it. How did that differ from writing a straightforward point A to point B novella for you?
It was very different in every way too, because before even getting into the whole setup of the interactivity and stuff, it was in first person present tense,
I hate that. Sorry, I hate that.
which I usually stick with third person past tense.
Yeah.
And so uh, took some getting used to that. And then after I was done with it, realizing that I accidentally carried it over into the other thing I was working on at the time and had to go back and change it. But yeah, so I had to get used to that, which took a little while. But then for the most part, it wasn't too different. I was still started at point A, worked towards point B, and didn't really plan ahead too much. I just had to keep in mind looking for pivotal moments or anything significant or even some less significant things just to add a little bit of like flavor and stuff like that into it, like, and just remember, okay, here's an option, people are going to be able to make this option, I need to add something in here, and then writing the same thing two different ways.
Because so did you get any guidance from Livia? Because when I talked to her, she actually showed me the schematics of the stories that she writes, and she, the woman with a plan, she had it all, very detailed, all these branches, everything. Did you get some help from her, or were you
Yeah,
just
she had everything ready for me, like sent me a bunch of files with basically a tutorial on how to do it, how to format everything in the Word program so that it would be ready for them to go through afterwards and code it.
hmm
And yeah, like it's very complicated and I don't know anything about that stuff, but she has it down that with her tutorials and everything that she sent me, it made it much easier.
mm. Yeah. It's a very interesting approach, what she's doing. And so the story that you wrote for it's called Unearthed Stories, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've got the app here on the phone. Um, did you completely stray away into a different kind of writing style or genre, or did you stay within your fantasy world? Because that would have been interesting.
I stayed in, that was set in the Vermin of the Old Empire world.
Okay.
So, which that series, it's all shorter fiction, novellas, short stories, and it's all, I'm going to do a bunch of different things that all take place around the same time. So they'll be interconnected. Characters will show up in multiple things, but they're all standalone. And so far, everything starts at the end of this massive battle.
Mm.
And so each story just follows a different person or a different group of people that survive that battle and where they go from there.
I really like that idea because it's something I think I mentioned a couple of times. I always had it wasn't even a half baked idea. It was just the notion that I would love to read some kind of, like, you open a box and there's different booklets, different novellas, and you could just pick them in any whichever order. But when you read them all, the whole story came to, or you pieced the whole story together. And what you're talking about sort of described that notion that I had in my head. And I think, is that kind of what you're, will it
Yeah,
everything?
absolutely. So like each story is its own story, but also each story will have a little bit more world building, and each story fleshes out the entire world a little bit more, but everything's self-contained. You can read them in any order you want, but everything you'll when you read one, you'll be like, oh, that sounds like it's that guy from that story, or and stuff like that.
That sounds exactly like kind of what I would love to read. And so how many different stories have you got in mind for that project?
I have in mind right now a definite two more novellas, and other than that, there will be more than that, but those are the only two that I know what they're gonna be.
Is that the Verming of the Old Empire series, right?
Yep.
Okay. Um, so because we had here in the chat someone like praising the cover of your book. So how much are you putting into it? So are you paying an editor? Are you paying a cover designer? Are you doing it all yourself? What's the setup?
For the covers, the ones I got so far, I ordered pre-made covers,
Hmm.
so that ones I found that fit the stories, and that saved me a bit of money. But I don't
Hmm.
know if you saw on the forums, I had a problem with that recently
Mm.
because they usually use stock images. And the one for the dregs, which was going to be coming out at the end of the month, another book just came out at the beginning of the month that's pretty much almost identical covers.
Right.
So um quick pulled it, postponed the release to the end of November, and then scrambled to find another cover artist that has a quick enough turnaround to
Hmm.
try to get a new cover done. And I'm in the process of that right now. But that was a way to try to save a little bit of money. And now in the future, I'm going to have to just budget better and set aside and probably work a little bit more overtime before book release.
Is the woes of the indie author. But okay, so hang on, because I didn't know anything about that sort of thing, that kind of part of the business. So obviously, you can commission someone to design the artwork for your books, and that costs whatever it costs. But what's this other thing about stock images? How does that work?
It's usually there will be artists that'll get the uh, rights, the royalty free or whatever stock images, and then they'll manipulate the images, combine images, and just do different things to make them look different. Usually,
Uh-huh.
sometimes they do less things to make them look
Yeah.
different, and then they'll design the covers and do the typography and everything like that.
Hmm. So, but they don't withdraw that image once they've created a cover or anything like that.
Since as far as the stock image goes, that it's
That's
those are
that.
on the stock websites, that it's not going to get pulled once it's used.
Right.
But then the place that you get the cover from, they will, but that stock image is still out there to be used.
All right. So you
So
just
that was the problem. The stock image was such an artistically recognizable thing, and it wasn't really changed at all from the original stock. It
hmm.
just had like a few things superimposed on top of it. So that's where the issue came in.
Interesting. So basically, you found yourself with a cover that was just way too similar to another
Yeah,
one,
I was actually scrolling through Facebook
and it was accidental.
and saw just the other, like 2 days ago, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw on one of like the fantasy book groups a picture, and I was like, "Holy shit, someone's talking about my book." And then I looked, and I was like, "Oh no, they aren't. This is a problem." And yeah, that's how that happened.
So, and was it the same artist that did your book cover?
No, it's just I ended up looking more because like when I first, because I bought this book cover back in April, I think
Hmm.
the beginning of April, when I was like beginning to write the book, knowing that I thought it was the perfect cover for it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have it on hand to be ready to go. And I'm not great with technology. I tried doing Google reverse image search
Hmm.
to make sure it wasn't out there. But I think I tried it again afterwards, after all this happened. And I think what threw it off was the title being on it and taking up
Mm.
too much of it. Because then I cropped it. I cropped the title and my name and everything off of the cover. So it was just the image. And that's when it popped up everywhere. And I saw that it popped up from the stock image sites and saw that it
Right.
looked exactly the same on there.
Okay. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's a very interesting story. Thank you. So that's another worry for anyone looking to self-publish and work within those constraints. Um, but hang on. So how did you go about? Because then you have to have the promoting and the PR hat on, or in your case, bandana, as is the case. Like, how did you go about promoting your books and getting them out there?
That's the part I'm definitely not very good at. That is mostly just Twitter and word of mouth, and that's pretty much all I do right now. I want to look into. There's a few places that do book tours where they'll get you connected with reviewers and booktubers and
Hmm.
the whole gamut.
Yeah.
And I want to look into one of those at some point, but as of right now, I'll get a hold of a few reviewers and see if they want copies and mail them out. But otherwise, just posting on Twitter and stuff like that.
But for anyone listening now, I think I think it's fair to say that there is a fair amount of quality to your writing because just recently you got rejected. Hey.
I got a very nice rejection.
Yeah. So how was that?
That was exciting because when I submitted a short story to a magazine, I'm not going to say any details. I just don't know how that works.
Yep.
But I was expecting to just get the initial cross the board. Sorry, thank you for your submission, but sorry, we're not interested.
Hmm.
And then a few months went by and I didn't get that. And I was like, oh, I probably messed up and sent the email wrong. And then
Always.
just like a few a few weeks ago, I got an email saying, sorry, we haven't gotten back to you sooner, but we've chose your story to shortlist to go on as the top 10% of submissions. And then more recently, I got another email saying that they aren't going to be purchasing the story, but it was one of their favorites. And
Hmm.
while it just wasn't fitting for the time, they told me to make sure I submit again in the future, asked me if I had any other short stories ready to go or anything like that. Unfortunately, I did not. But
But
yeah,
now,
it
now,
was.
now you're quickly gonna get back into it, is it?
I've been planning on trying to get more short stories. This is the first time I've ever submitted anything for a magazine or anything like that, and I've wanted to. So it's kind of
Mm.
encouraging that I'm going to try to use that as a way to get my name out there a little bit more and start writing some more short stories and see what I can do.
Yeah, no, but that is fantastic. And was that so? Again, was that a different genre, or did you stay within your lane, so to speak?
That was still within my lane pretty much.
Hmm. Okay.
Like most of what I write, I stay within this certain spectrum of what I'm comfortable with my style and my preference. But I do like to add little elements here and there, like it's one of the stories I have planned for with the vermin of the old empire, like very in the Scroungers, there's a very minor whodunit sort of feel to it.
Hmm.
And then in the dregs, there's a very minor heist sort of feel to it. And the next one is going to be called The Blackguards, which I'm writing right now. And that is going to be my attempt at cozy grimdark.
Well, no, 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 no. That's too much of a juxtaposition of terms there. I'm not computing that.
It may not work out,
Cozy
but yes,
grim dark.
that's what's in the back of my head as I'm trying to write it.
Right. Okay. Okay. I think I'll definitely have to pick that one up. So, this story that almost got you there. So, what are you planning to do with it? Submit to other places, shelve it, and maybe for future release. What happens with that now?
I'm not sure. I may submit it to other places. I may just set it aside until I have a few more stories to go with it and release it in an anthology,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is something I had wanted to consider in the past. So that's a possibility, but it just depends on. I'm gonna look in as I'm looking into more magazines that are taking submissions and stuff. If I see one that seems like it would be a fit for, I'll give it a shot.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Sorry, and I think I asked you before. So, are you paying someone to edit your works, or are you self-editing?
Right now, I'm self-editing, which
Mm.
I know is not the best, but
No,
just
no,
very meticulously and over again. I haven't gotten complaints yet, so
no. Oh, no, there you go. That's the
but
way. And who's your beta reader?
I don't have any.
Oh, no long-term suffering partner or siblings or anything like
Not yet, at least. Not haven't been forcing it on my partner yet,
that.
and I probably won't make her do it. But
No, no,
but
no.
yeah,
Would you trust her?
with she doesn't really read fantasy.
Right. So if she told, okay, so no, so this is the thing. So if she told you she didn't like it, like she doesn't like fantasy, like so you will kind of expect that. But if she told you she liked it, how would you interpret that? Would you think she's just trying to say the right thing, or would you believe it?
No, I'd believe it.
Okay, no, no, that's fair enough. Trust is important in a relationship, they say.
Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. So because you talked about your anthologies and all that sort of stuff, I think you've got you're building a volume of work. You got the two novels, almost two novellas done. Are you planning of doing a sort of a crowd fund and get the books? Because are they available in physical format, or is it all
Yeah,
print on,
the
or is it
ebook
print on
and
demand?
paperback.
The
Yeah, print on demand.
right. But would you consider doing a self-funded or kickstarted sort of run?
I would like to. I'd like to have one day, like, especially once one of the series is finished, maybe do like a nice set of hardcovers. That
Hmm.
would be awesome. But also see if I have enough people that would be interested first.
Yeah. It, I no, I hear you. It's a tricky thing because from talking to editors and agents and stuff like that, they don't seem to care about whether you've got a, I don't know what's the word, a fan base or a X number of followers to back up your work. They just seem to care about the quality of your writing. Um, so I think maybe that's probably best to put your efforts into that sort of thing than trying to have like an Instagram or a TikTok sort of following or anything like that.
Mm.
Uh, but how do you feel about that? Like, is it in the back of your mind that maybe you should be putting more time into social media and posting and creating a following?
It has been, because it's definitely something that I've never been great at. It's never was too big on social media before, and I try to use a little. I try to use it more now, but even still, it's just a weird thing.
I,
Like,
I'll
I always,
go on, go on, go on, go on.
I always say that, like, trying to interact on social media. A lot of the times, I feel like I'm just like that creepy guy at the bar that's just walking up to someone's conversation, like, "Hey, I'm gonna join in on this now."
Uh, I look, I didn't last very long on Facebook. I lasted even less on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now. And other than YouTube, if you consider YouTube a social media platform, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. When I was talking to Steve, that sense of shouting to the void and hoping that someone sort of picks it up, and I don't know, it's a strange thing.
Yeah.
Well, but in a sense, I suppose this is some kind of social media. But we've been talking for almost an hour, so I think there's definitely a different feel to it.
Yeah. And also, like, that's one of the things I like about the page chewing forums, because it's a small, like a smaller group of people that we interact pretty regularly. So we all know each other to some extent at this
Mm.
point.
And it does feel manageable. It's not like some sort of weird community with thousands of people and so on. But talking of anthologies and talking about page chewing, I think there's enough writers in page chewing that some kind of joint project could come out of that. Didn't Layla organize one last year?
Yes, we were having regular meetings about it, but now it was delegated to just have like a few people go over figuring out all the details. But we've been compiling the stories, and that, as far as I'm aware, is going to be going forward at some point.
Oh, so it is happening.
Yep.
So who's involved in that? Obviously, your good self.
Me, who all? I believe both of the Carls,
Right.
Alex,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Is Holly there?
Anthony.
Holly and
I
Susanna?
don't know. Holly wasn't going to. I think she just didn't have the time, had
No.
too much going on. And also, Susanna was considering it originally, I believe. Like, I remember she was in the first couple meetings with us, but is still kind of like, as it's been kind of like going on, I think a few people, her and Livia, I believe, are possibly gonna be doing it, but it's not 100% right now. See how everything goes as it gets a little bit closer to pulling together.
Mm. Yeah, I would have liked to have taken part on that. I've got a few stories of my own, but I didn't know if thematically it would fit or what the deal was there. And I would hate to have to translate my own writing into English. So there's that. Um, so these short stories that you've submitted for publishing, or you're considering, what's the length we're talking about there?
This last one was, I forget. It was between 3 and 4,000 words.
So
I
it's not.
can't remember which.
So it's not very much. It's just like 6 pages of.
Yeah.
Okay. So because I in the past I wrote short stories more like kind of like horror, creepy sort of thing, which I think is a perfect medium for that. And talking to Susanna, she kind of struggled with the idea of writing a short story. I think she tried once and ended up being a novel. Um, so like she cannot write short stories. So how does your mindset change from writing a novel to a short story?
It's difficult, like especially the first time I tried it. Like it was very easy to end up at like 10,000 words and be like, oh, this isn't going to work.
I wish that was easy for me, by the way. Yeah, go on.
Which actually, my first book, I originally just wanted it to be an anthology of short stories, and then it
Mhm.
just turned into 100,000 word novel. But yeah, it's just having to keep in mind and not put too much, or at least for me, not put too much time into descriptions. And like I kind of write kind of punchy anyway, or
Mhm.
just like hitting beats and quickly to the point.
Mhm.
So for me, I think that shorter is might be more my style. But yeah, and just trying to cut out any scenes that might not be absolutely necessary to get to the end.
So, is your focus then again to tell a story, or because I think sometimes with a short story you can aim for an effect, so not necessarily tell a story, but just kind of elicit some kind of reaction from the reader. Are you still story based, or do you sometimes go for effect?
I think I would think I kind of go more for effect than more for a feel and for getting to know a certain character or something rather than an overall plot.
Mm. Okay, no, that's very interesting. Um, so I think we're kind of coming up to the hour mark. Um, so what's the plan then? You've been writing just for 8 years. Can you see yourself not writing?
Aside from once in a while when I need a break, no.
Yeah.
Like it's just even if I take a break, it's always in the back of my head. Like that's actually why I've been having trouble even listening to audiobooks. Like I'll just like have a plot point pop up in my head in the middle of listening to an audiobook and be like, ah, I gotta shut this off because I'm not gonna be able to concentrate on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I just have to keep doing it.
No, that's amazing, man. And look, I think you should. And I do apologize. Because these days I get more requests from people asking me to read the books and review the books, and now I've started to say no to some people. Like my TBR
Hmm.
is just getting out of hand, but I'm hoping to clean up shop in 2025. So I'm hoping to finish like the big series that I've got going on, and I think then I kind of feel like I owe some debts to some people, and I wanna pick up certain books from certain familiar names to the channel and the forums. So I think I'll definitely, hopefully, will be getting into the world of Emros myself.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love if you read it, but also because of my bad tendencies of not being good about reading things, I always completely understand someone not getting to it and will never hold it against anyone.
No, not at all. So Anyway, so thank you very much, Thomas. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I've actually learned a few things. I think you're still crazy for rolling dice and deciding the fate of your characters that way. That was quite illuminating. But before we go, where can people find you and your books and your work? What's the best place?
Best place to get a hold of me is either the Page Chewing forums, or I'm on Twitter at Stone and Shield. And I have a blog that I update occasionally, Fall of Emros.blogspot.com.
Which, speaking of, because I was nosing around there, the map of the world. How do you do that? I love a good old fantasy map.
That one I originally did by hand, and then I parts of it were good, parts of it were bad, and I ended up, I think I scanned it into the computer and erased everything but the outline, and then tried using one of those programs like Wonder Draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the end I kind of gave up, and mostly because I think there's a few different versions and I haven't looked at the website in a while. But I think I ended up just going with squares and numbers for the towns and stuff. But yeah, the outline was by hand. And it was either all by hand or by using Wonder Draft or something like that.
So, sorry, because like we were closing up now, and I got these talking points. But so, did you have a specific geography in mind? Because like sometimes when I used to DM for Dungeons and Dragons, like sometimes I wanted the world to be a particular way, because obviously you cannot have a seafaring campaign if you are landlocked. So did you sort of force the geography to fit the story that you were telling?
For the most part, no. There are a few maps in that world that haven't been finished or shown yet, just because the books haven't gotten to that part of the world yet.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, and some of them, for some of them, I definitely had certain things in mind. But other parts, like the main one, I actually did that. I took a quill and ink and just kind of started making lines so that the ink would run a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, took a light board and a pencil and traced it, and then so that where the ink kind of flowed to when I had too much on it, that kind of helped create it.
Interesting. All right. Okay. So, yeah, I suppose you are a fairly sort of crafty person with your day job and stuff, even it may not be keyhole surgery necessarily.
Yeah, and I used to do construction before this, and I was a butcher for a few years and a coffee roaster. So I've have a lot of trades under my belt.
And that do you pay homage to that in the books? Does it ever come up, or you like to
A
throw
little bit,
little things for yourself in there?
a little bit, yeah.
That's nice. That's nice.
But more so, I think the homage to myself is that there's always characters with creaky joints and back pain.
Okay. Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm getting to an age I can relate to that as well. It's brilliant. Anyway, Thomas, thank you once again. Thank you for being here tonight, afternoon for you. It's been great, and I'm hoping to catch up with you at some point next year when I read the books.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me, and hopefully we'll play some D&D together again sometime.
Yeah. And thank you obviously to Drew and everyone else that was popping in the chat during the conversation. As usual, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Take lots and lots of care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.